Welcome everybody. In this video we are going to create this pinball game. We'll cover everything and that will take us about 2.5 hours. So I'll split up the tutorial in 3 parts and this is going to be the first part. Let's get started right away. Let's start by creating a new project. I'm gonna call it Pinball Vibes. And it's gonna be UOP project. Let's start by creating a floor. I'm gonna use a 3D cube for that. Let's extend it in the Y and the Z axis like this, and now I'm gonna use a second cube to create the pinball machine, and I'm gonna extend that in the Y and the X axis. So let's make it a little bit like a pinball machine, same shape, so something like this. I think put it a little bit above the floor, and now we have our camera over here. Let's make sure that we are looking at the background. Need to put it a little bit to the back, a little bit more to capture the whole pinball machine. Okay, something like this. And now we can create the pinball ball, and I'm gonna use a sphere for that. So let's just put it on top of the pinball background. So this pinball machine is standing up. I did that on purpose because I want to use the gravity of the physics engine. So, but if we now run the game, actually nothing will happen. We'll just see the ball floating in the air because we didn't apply physics yet. But if we add a rigid body, you will see that the ball will start falling down, and it will fall onto the floor. But the pinball of course always bounces, so we need to create physics material. Let's call it physics material ball, and attach that to the sphere collider. So now if we run the game, the ball not only falls down but also bounces, but that is if we set the bounciness to 1. So now it will bounce. The only thing is that the ball is moving a bit slowly. For a pinball machine it should be dropping much faster, so we can use the project settings for that. We just increase the acceleration, and later we will do that by script, but we don't have a script yet, so let's do it like this. So now it's falling much faster, and we can use this as a starting point for our pinball machine. The next thing we're going to do is add a texture to the pinball ball. I want to use something like marble, so we can see that the ball is really moving. So you can download one of these textures and put it inside this folder. I created a folder called game over here. Later we can create a better structure, but for now I don't have any things that I created myself, so everything I created I put in game first, and then later I can observe what I all the things I created and think of a better structure for my folders. But for now, because we don't have a lot of things, we can just put everything in here. Okay, so I copied my marble picture over here, and now we can create a material. Let's call it matte marble. And put the texture onto that material. And now if we put that material on the ball has a nice marble look. The only thing is that if you look a bit closer, you will notice that the ball isn't moving. The marble stays at the same spot. We want to make it move, so therefore we want to write a script. I'm going to create a script folder for that. And create the first script of the game. Let's call it ball, because we will apply it to the ball. Actually, let's create another script first. I'm going to create a script for the camera, so let's call it camera. And we want the camera to follow the ball. Then we can put the camera a bit closer. Like over here, for example. So if the camera just follows the ball in the Y and the X axis, then we can use a close-up like this. And to do that, we need a reference to the ball. So if I save this, and put the camera on the script on the camera, then we can set the reference. So we set the reference like this. By the way, let's just call it ball. And let's call this background. Stay a little bit organized here. Now if we go back to the camera script, in the update function we can set the transform position. And we set it to the ball transform position. For the X and the Y axis. But for the Z axis, we're going to use the ball's position itself. So if we save this, you will see that the camera now follows the ball, and now it's dropped onto the floor. But you see that it's not moving yet. It's not rolling like it should be. We want to have that nice rolling effect. In order to do that, we need to create a script for the ball. And therefore we're gonna store its position as a vector 2, because we're only gonna store the x and the y axis. And I'm gonna call this previous position. We can use that to determine the speed. So over here we can set the position. And from that position and the previous position, so we set the previous position at the end, and from those two we can calculate the speed, because the speed is the position minus the previous position. And if we know the speed, we know the direction that the ball is moving in, because that's the direction of the speed. And oh, forgot to put the position in here. And if we know the speed, so the ball moves in a certain direction, for example in this direction, then we want to have the ball rolling around an axis perpendicular to that speed. So if you take the ball, you move it in this direction, we want to have an axis like this, and the ball will move around that axis. Like this. So that is this axis that I just showed you, the green one, the y-axis. So we need to have the perpendicular of the speed, the rotation axis. Fortunately, Unity has a function for that already. It's the cross product, by the way. So we can use this function that will just create that perpendicular vector for us. And now we can rotate around that vector. So we can say transform.rotate. And now we need to set the axis. So we're going to set it to the rotation axis dot x and rotation axis dot y. And for the z we don't have a value, but we can set it to 0. And the speed which we will rotate is the speed of the ball. So we already have that speed. We can use it, and we set it to the magnitude, so it's float value, and we want to speed it up a little bit probably, so I'm gonna put it times 40, and we're gonna rotate around in the world space. So like this. I need to create a vector 3 from these 3 values. So we've attached the ball script to the ball, And now let's see what happens. You see that the ball is rolling in the right direction. Now we can create the outlines of the pinball machine. We're gonna use cubes for that as well. Okay, I think this is good enough for the first version. Now let's create a root game object, and we're going to put everything of the pinball machine inside, so we can easily scale the pinball machine or rotate it. Now we're gonna need the flippers over here. So I'm searching for a pinball flipper 3D model. I found this one. I think this looks nice. So we are going to download it as a .blend. And then we can open it in Blender. Okay, I've downloaded this file, so I'm gonna open it with Blender. And now I'm gonna export it. I don't need the light and the camera. I just want the cube. So I'm gonna export it as an FBX file. I've copied the model of the flipper over here. So let's drag it into the scene. We need to rotate it by this angle, the X angle. And now we can copy it. Put one over there. Rotate this by 180 degrees. And actually I want this flipper to be a little bit longer, so I'm gonna extend it. Copy this one so it's exactly the same length as the other one. Okay, so now we got our flippers in place, but we need to be able to move them. So we need to have some input for that. We're going to use the new input system. So first we are going to add the input system package. Going to the Unity registry, search for input. Install the input system. Okay, now that we've installed the input package, we can create a new folder. And we're going to put the input actions inside. So let's create an input actions file. Call it whatever you like. And let's define some actions. So we create a new action called left flipper. And we are going to bind this left flipper action to the left shift key, and also to the left control key, and that's that's the same we're going to do for the right flipper. And now we are at this input definition system. We can also add actions for the for shooting the ball in the beginning. I'm gonna call that shoot. I'm gonna use the spacebar for that. And now, while we're still busy over here, we can add some actions for to move the camera around. So let's say camera back. That will be the S key. And camera forward will be the W key. So I think this is all the inputs that we're gonna need in this game. Okay, in order to bind the key pressing to this flippers, we need a flipper script. So let's create a script over here. Call it flipper. Now we could attach this script to both the flippers, but actually we need only one script, one instance of the script. So let's just create a game object over here. I'm calling it game, and there I will put or actually I'll call this script, and over here I will put all the scripts that are used in the scene, and I'm gonna create a game object for the flipper script as well, so we can attach the flipper script to that. And now we have one instance of the flipper script in the scene. So if we now attach the input action, player input, to this game object as well, we can use that input inside this script, because they are in the same game object. You can do something like this. So this method is going to be called as soon as you hit the left flipper, the one keys of that are bind to the left flipper. So this name needs to be exactly the name that you have used inside your actions over here. So it's on and then the name of the action, and then you can just simply use it like this. So what are we going to do when we press the left flipper or the right flipper? Well, for now we're just going to create a boolean over here. And we're gonna store the value of the pressed state of the flipper. Now we need to make the flipper move. If you're going to rotate it like this, it will rotate around the center. So the point of pivot will be at the center. So that's not what we want. We want the point of pivot to be over here. You can do that by creating an empty game object and putting the flipper inside it. And now if we offset this child, and we rotate this parent, okay, this is not properly offset. You can see here I want the parent to be over here, so then I need to move this almost there, a little bit higher, something like this. So now if I rotate this parent, you see that we have a working flipper. So you could write a script to rotate this parent object, and in that way move the flipper. But that's not what you're gonna do, because actually Unity offers something else that we can utilize over here, and that's called a hinge joint. So we will use a hinge joint, and we will also use a rigid body then, and we add a mesh collider as well. We want to use limits on the, and we want to use the spring on the hinge joint, I also want to set collision detection to a continuous dynamic. This is more accurate than the default value, because the ball is moving very fast and we want it to be as accurate as possible. Actually, if you want to have a real good pinball engine, you probably don't want to use this physics engine of Unity, because it's not really specialized to deal with pinball physics, but it will suffice us for now. So let's just implement this. So if you take a closer look at the flipper now, you can see that there is a small yellow arrow over here. That's the pivot axis of the flipper. So it's now pointing this direction. It should actually point perpendicular to this this flipper. So we need to change the axis and use the Z axis instead. And also this anchor point, it should be over here somewhere, because that's where we want to pivot around. So if I move this, I think it's the x-axis that needs to be adjusted by probably a very small value. So you can see it's now over here. It can be maybe like over here somewhere. I think this is a good spot to put the hinge. So now we need to set the limits. Can use this button for that. Now you see that it's moving like this. We want to actually move it to the other side. So then we need to make the z-axis -1. And now you see that we are moving in this direction. Well, what's the maximum position of a flipper? So this is the rest position. Well, I think something like this, for example. So let's use that. And now we need a script to actually move from this to that position. So in the flipper script we are going to add some variables. We're going to serialize a few of them so we can set them in the editor, and we're going to initialize them. So now we have the joint spring released and joint spring pressed. That's two versions of the joint spring, where they are either in the maximum or the minimum position. And now we can use this update function to check if the flipper is pressed. And if that's the case, then we will set the hinge joint to the pressed version. And otherwise we will set it to the released version. And same goes for the right one, of course. I've also copied the hinge joint to the second flipper, and over here I use a z-axis of 1 instead of -1 to make the flipper move in the upward direction. So now we can attach the flipper game objects to the flipper script, so it can use the hinge joint. And I forgot one thing. If we go back to the inputs, you'll see that this is an action type. We want this to be a button type. We want it to be a value, also for this flipper. So that's because if the value, if the flipper is pressed, we receive the value of true, and if it's released again, we receive the value of 0. If you use it as a button, you don't get the released event over here. So now we can try to run the game and see if it's working. Yeah, you can see that we can now move the flippers. Very nice. But the ball just falls out of the flipper because of the pinball machine, because I've set it up like this, and it's just vertical standing. so the ball can just fall out like that. So there's an easy way to fix that. We can copy, for example, this box and put it over here somewhere. So now the ball can't fall out anymore because this box is having a collider, and it collides with that box, and then it bounces back in the flipper, in the pinball machine, just like in real pinball machine where there is glass. So just like with glass, we want to be able to see through this cube. So we disable the mesh renderer, but now the collision detection is still enabled. So if we try it again, I hope it will just keep a ball inside the pinball machine, and it's keeping it inside, but it's also not moving it anymore. So it's a little bit too tight. So now the ball is like locked. So what we need to do is make the sides maybe a little bit bigger, and then make this a little bit upwards, so the ball doesn't get stuck anymore. We could also make the ball a bit smaller. That's another solution for this. I'll just move this a little bit backwards and the ball a little bit down. And we can select all of these sides and just scale them at once like this. Actually, there's no reason to make them really small. They can stick out on the other side, that's no problem. Let's call this glass. In this background, I'm going to move it a little bit. So now if we put the ball on the side, you can see that it fits in. Okay, now it works like it should. The ball stays inside the pinball machine. And now let's go to the camera script. And we're gonna use those keys that we defined. So if you take a look at the inputs, we got the camera back and the camera forward keys. So we are going to add the player input also to this camera, and use this map, same map as for the flippers. And now we can create the on camera back and on camera forward functions, and they will move the camera transform. By, I don't know, let's try something like this. And we're going to use time delta time here. Yeah, so now we can zoom in and out with the W and S keys to get the proper vision that we like. Before we are going to continue to build the pinball machine, we're going to add some assets to make it a bit more beautiful. First, I want to download this free texture pack. We could of course also download some textures from other sites, but if you download this pack from the Unity asset store, it comes with normals, so you can get some depth in your textures if you like that. And we will also add a skybox for the background. We will only use free assets in the tutorials, so you can just register at the assetstore.unity and you can download them for free. Of course, you can give a donation if you like. Okay, so let's first set the background. I think something like this will look nice. Let's create some materials. For the floor and also for the background, for the flippers and for the sides. And now we're going to use the textures we just added from the asset. Let's first start with the floor. I'm going to lock this so I can easily edit it. And then I'm going to go to the textures and try to find something I like for the floor. For example, this one. Let's extend the floor. I'm using a floor here because the skybox only renders the upper part, and this part is a bit boring, so we can create our own floor over there. So something like this. And now we can repeat the the texture. So for example 10 times. Or maybe even 50 times. And you can use the normal image to create some depth, and you can also use the height map. If you want to give it even more depth, you can use something like this. And now for the background, maybe this is nice. Yeah, it's quite cool. Okay, this is too much. We can use a little bit like so. By the way, let's open this in paint.net. If we make this a black and white image, now save it. We can easily change the color by changing the base color. So here we can find a suitable color for this background. Maybe something not too light, something like this. Not too much color in there. And for this one, also make it black and white. Okay, I think I go with this for now. And for the flippers, we will just use no texture, but I want to use some color. So make them a bit yellowish. I also want to give them a kind of a metallic look, so they shine. And the same goes for the walls. Make them also yellow. Shiny. And finally, let's also change the ball color. Okay, that's better. Now let's continue to build the pinball machine. That's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2 and 3 that'll follow soon. Thanks for watching.